Panagariya, let me ask you about another contentious issue, and this was an issue that you were involved with, sir. The National Medical Commission, this was an idea that the NITI Aayog had taken forward. You had drafted the bill as well. Now, we've seen the Indian Medical Association come up very strongly against the NMC bill. The bill has now been sent to a parliamentary committee. The IMA's objection is that this is another blow to the medical profession, that this basically bureaucratizes the medical profession and gives overarching powers to the Central Health Ministry. It takes away representation from state governments. How would you respond to the criticism of the bill, and how would you respond to the concerns that have been raised about the National Medical Commission bill, sir?
Yeah, I'm afraid that all these criticisms are completely misplaced. You should really, anybody who is seriously interested in this should read the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee of the Rajya Sabha. Now remember, this is the Rajya Sabha Parliamentary Standing Committee, which issued a report. This is report number 92 in March 2016.
Yes.
And you know, just if you hate to read a long report, just read the last 4 pages of that report.
Yes.
It in fact forecasts this fact. In its concluding paragraph, the Rajya Sabha Standing Committee report actually says that there is that the entrenched and vested interests are going to do everything to derail this important reform.
Yes.
But the government has to exercise its constitutional right and bring sanity to the entire educational system in medicine, in medical profession. So this was a mandate actually by the Rajya Sabha, and we took that mandate very seriously. And and the Rajya Sabha, this standing committee report had endorsed the report by Dr. Roy Chaudhary, which had recommended precisely these 4 boards and a commission at the head of it, which is exactly what we have recommended in this bill.
Yes.
And if you actually look at Roy Chaudhary Committee's recommendations, they did not recommend any elected members. Actually, they recommended all the members by selection or ex officio.
Yes.
What we have done is to have 25. We recommended 25 members, of which 5 will be elected.
Yes.
And more than half comfortably will be doctors.
Yeah.
So we have certainly the commission, as we have recommended, has a majority of doctors there, but we need to bring them by selection, because what has happened is that the same vested interests that today control the MCI,
Yes.
they also control the Indian Medical Association.
Yeah.
So it's really same set of leaders who are controlling the 2 institutions. And what we have seen actually is over the decades, actually, I'm not saying even years, but over the decades, a deterioration of the education, medical education. So this needs to be, and in particular, you need to bring in the serious scholars of medicine, the serious practitioners, clinicians in medicine, to actually guide the educational system in medical profession, which is not currently the case. Most because the politicization is so strong. Virtually all of the leading individuals, leading guiding lights of the profession, have pretty much, you know, quietly exited from providing any kind of guidance to the medical education system. So I think this is very crucial for the country today. And
you're right that the bill has taken forward the recommendations of the...
This is why we have...
Yes, I agree with you, sir, that the bill has essentially taken forward the recommendations of the 2016 Parliamentary Standing Committee. I have gone through the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee very quickly, sir, because, you know, one particular clause has caused a fair degree of consternation. And I would imagine that we need the government to clarify what the actual position will be. And this is that bridge course that Ayush practitioners will be able to avail of and then be able to provide provide allopathic treatment as well. Now, the bill does not give complete clarity on what eventually will these Ayush practitioners be able to prescribe. What will they be able to go anything beyond just the cursory basic sort of, peripheral medication that they could provide. What was the thinking here, and what is it that you would expect by way of clarity from the government?
See, so the thinking in the committee was that currently as it exists, we simply do not have enough doctors. And lot of the practitioners, and this is not just in rural areas, but even in urban areas, are unqualified practitioners. These are people who have been trained by the doctors themselves, people who work for 2 or 3 years with the doctors and pick up some basic skills, and they begin to practice. I think this needs to be streamlined, and until we have a lot more doctors, actually a bigger stock of doctors, we need to speed up the availability of doctors, at least for some basic medicine. For the practice of some basic medicine, and that is the general thinking. Now what are going to be the details? There, ultimately this will have to be dealt with in the rules and regulations that are issued afterwards. A legislation cannot go into those kinds of details. And I would like actually, ultimately the medical profession and Ayurvedic and Indian systems of medicines also to come in and bear on this. They should advise the government as to exactly how this should be done. But the legislation can go only so far in that in that direction.
Right. So I want to bring to your notice a poll that we've done. This is our budget poll with local circles, and the first of its kind, where we've asked people about their expectations on particular sectors. And today we're talking about healthcare. Now, majority, 45%, want more investments and monitoring facilities at government hospitals. 74% feel corruption is common in government hospitals. 65% don't even bother going to government hospitals. 82% want the national health policy to regulate private hospitals. 87% want standardized charges at private hospitals. So clearly, the mood of the people seems to suggest that the infrastructure, whether it is government particularly so, or even private, there is something amiss. There is something rotten about the Indian medical system. What is it, and specifically from a budget point of view, beyond just allocation, what would your expectation really be to try and fix this?
Shereen, look, the problems in health as well as actually education, I would say, are the problems that have been with us for the last several decades. We simply have not done a good job of the provision of both health and education for decades, and so the problem cannot be wished away, meaning it's going to take time. So that's my first kind of reaction. Now, as we begin to grow richer, more resources become available. I think more resources need to be brought into health and education. But more resources alone is not going to do it. One needs to have a proper policy regime in place. We need to make sure that we make effective use of the private sector. We also need to put the recipient or the beneficiary really at the head of this. Ultimately we need to give much greater decision making power to the beneficiary, and this is where I have said that, look, empower, give the money, give the cash actually to the beneficiary, whether it is education or it is health, and let the beneficiary decide who he wants to go, who she wants to go. And I think eventually we will need to get there. But let me re-emphasize that, at the very basic level, you haven't got enough doctors to service such a large population. So one needs to, work at the creation of the human capital that is required both in education and in health. I think that's a process that will that has been neglected actually for very long, and it needs to be brought back to the center stage of solving this problem.
So something that else that needs to be brought back to the center stage, of course, is this business of strategic divestment. This was your one big disappointment, even when you left India in August, and we haven't really seen any forward movement, even though we keep hearing about how we should expect something on the strategic disinvestment front. You know, we're still talking about the possibility of Air India perhaps going through in this calendar year. But what do you believe, Mr. Panagariya, is the problem here? I mean, it's been more than 3.5 years and not one strategic disinvestment has taken place.
Yes, as you know, as you have already stated, you know, I have been advocating this for quite a while. There is blessing from the Prime Minister because, after all, the cabinet has approved as many as 30 public sector enterprises for privatization. So I really don't believe that there is any lack of will on the part of the Prime Minister and his office to move this forward. So the matter, it seems to me, is really stuck in the DIPAM, the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management. It is DIPAM which seems not to be moving, and possibly the Prime Minister's office can push DIPAM a bit harder, because surely, you know, it has been quite a while since as many as 30 of these PSCs have been approved for disinvestment by the cabinet.
Right. Let me end then by asking you, Mr. Panagariya, you know, what would you advise the government not to do? What would be in the don't do list? We've talked about what the do list should have, but what would be in the don't do list? You have said resist the temptation of providing any kind of a fiscal stimulus that would move away from the path of fiscal consolidation. You've said resist the temptation of import substitution. What would you like to add to your don't do list?
Well, I think, you know, as a broad matter, I would also say that, you know, don't move too far away from the from the path of the reforms. I don't think there is a danger, because I really see that the government is continuing. It is quite unusual, actually, you know, the government to be in its 4th year and pushing the reforms pretty much with the same enthusiasm and force as it did in its 2nd and 3rd years. You know, so I'm generally very pleased with what has been happening. You know, the medical reform has been put on the floor of the Parliament, and even the Parliamentary Standing Committee has been asked to return very quickly and not delay the matter. I think that's very heartening. So, but, you know, in general, I would say that the government has taken the path of reforms, and I would wish that the government will stay that path.
All right, Mr. Panagariya, always a pleasure, sir. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Appreciate your time, and wish you a very happy 2018.
Pleasure to be with you, Shereen.